purpose of this presentation is to share the ins and outs of writing standard-based IEPs. During this presentation, we will share a keynote that will give the background of why CNSSP has moved toward writing IEPs using state standards and why this is important. We will also show you how to access the state standards in language arts and math. And finally, we will also provide you with examples of present levels of performance and goals written using the state standards. As you all know, our curriculum is based on Nebraska state standards. Academic content standards are grade level expectations that form a common core of learning for all students. Content standards establish expectations that answer the question, what do we want students to know and be able to do at the end of the grade or course of study? This is an example of where you can find the Nebraska state standards, and we'll share more about this later in our presentation. Developing standards-based IEP goals. Basing the student's IEP goals on grade-level content standards provides opportunities to learn the same content learned by the general education students. It addresses the unique needs presented by the student's disability, and it emphasizes access through analysis of the student's disability and how it will impact learning. The standards-based IEP must provide access to the general curriculum through content linked to grade-level standards, provide support services and specialized instruction necessary to progress in the general education curriculum. Standards-based does not mean the student cannot have behavior or social goals in addition to curriculum-based goals.
Okay, so all of that was the reason behind why we've decided to go to writing standards-based IEPs. Now we're going to get into showing you more specifically what that will look like. When you go to write a student's IEP, the first thing you'll want to do is collect as much current information as you can about that student. So some of those things might include courses of study and or curriculum guides for their grade level, current assessment data for the student, and that can come from a variety of different sources. For example, state assessments, so you could look at their NESA results, classroom assessments, that might include things such as their scholastic reading inventory results, their guided reading level. For math, it might include their DIBs. You could look at their data from their acuity assessments. And then you can also look at their most recent eligibility data, so information from their most recent MDT. Other things that you might want to include would be, or to look at, would be work samples, the previous year's IEP, and maybe some other information such as grades, discipline referrals, or attendance reports. So once you've gathered all of that information, then you develop a student profile. And that should just be a general statement regarding the student's strengths, their needs, how the disability affects progress in the general education curriculum, their most recent assessment or evaluation results, the status of their prior IEP goals, so whether progress has been made or their goal has been met, input from teachers, parents, and the student, and then beginning at age 14, information regarding their transition needs. And all of that information, as you know, then gets entered on page 2 of the IEP. You're going to summarize all of that information into a present level statement, and that's just a statement that says this is where the student's at right now. The purposes of a present level of educational performance statement is to provide a summary of baseline information that includes the student's academic achievement, to identify current functional performance, and then to provide an explanation of how the student's disability affects their involvement in participating in the general curriculum. Characteristics of good present level statements would be that they're standard-centered, they're data-driven, they're understandable, and they're measurable. Components are that you need to include the student's strengths, their needs, and how the student's disability affects performance in the general education curriculum. When you're writing a student's PLEP statement, be sure to not use the student's exceptionality to explain how the disability affects involvement progress in the general curriculum. So an example of what not to write would be something like, Marcus's learning disability affects his progress in the general curriculum. Instead, a better way would be to say, Marcus's weakness in applying strategies such as making inferences and making complex predictions affects his progress in comprehending 6th grade literacy materials. So here's a sample of a good PLEP statement. Classroom assessments indicate that Macy can use details and examples to draw conclusions from grade level reading passages. She experiences difficulty synthesizing ideas from reading passages and drawing inferences. Macy's difficulty with abstract reasoning may negatively impact her understanding and drawing inferences from text. So you can see in that example that it was standards-based, it included assessment information, it included her strengths and her weaknesses, and then it provided a statement of how her disability is impacting her learning.
Next, we'll discuss writing measurable annual goals. The purpose is to describe what a student can reasonably expect to accomplish in 1 year. Annual goals answer the question, what should the student be doing? Annual goals are related to the needs resulting from the student's disability that directly affect involvement and progress in the general education curriculum. Keep in mind that there needs to be a goal for every area of need identified in the student's present level of performance. So when we look at selecting content standards, we need to look at all grade levels of the content standards, and then determine which standards are most important for each student, based on progress in the general education curriculum. We want to compare the standards with the student's area of need and the impact of the disability, and we want to use data to determine the areas the student will find difficult without additional supports. We also want to keep in mind also that we use the Nebraska Academic Standards or the Nebraska Extended Indicators. When we're looking at extended indicators, remember that is only about 1% of our population, and those students are working toward goals that are related to independent living or job skills. Our annual goals must include certain things. We need to state who the student is, what their behavior is or what we want them to be doing, the criterion, or what level or degree we want them to accomplish that goal, the conditions, under what conditions are they working, and the time frame, and what length of time do we want that goal to be completed. Usually with us, it's 1 year or 36 weeks.
Okay, so we're going to lead into now some examples of PLEP statements and goals for some students, and they're all written based on Nebraska state standards. So we're going to give an elementary, a middle school, and a high school example. The first one is an example of an elementary student who has a need in the area of reading. Kaylee is in the 2nd grade. She knows the names and sounds of all 26 letters of the alphabet. She has difficulty blending those sounds together to read words. She also has difficulty reading sight words. She currently has mastered 57 out of the 100 first grade sight words. When given 1 minute to read a 2nd grade reading CBM passage, Kaylee currently reads 12 words correctly with 4 errors, which is at the 6th percentile when compared to other 2nd graders. The above information indicates that Kaylee will need support and/or direct instruction from special education providers in order to make progress toward the Nebraska state standards. So then a goal that's directly linked to her present level of performance would be, Kaylee is currently able to read 17 words correctly in 1 minute at the 1st grade level with 4 errors. In 36 weeks, when given 1 minute to read 1st grade reading CBM passages, she will be able to read 67 words correctly in 1 minute with 3 or fewer errors. And so you can see we used her progress monitoring data. In this case, it was from Ames Web to help set her goal. But then right after that, we're linking it directly to the Nebraska state standard that matches up with, which is students will learn and apply reading skills and strategies to comprehend text. And you can see when we did that, we didn't worry about putting a grade level with that standard, and that's because all of those are worded the same way, no matter which grade level you were looking at. So it's not so important in that part that we designate which grade level that comes from. And then in this particular case, we went through and we drilled down and looked at objectives that are underneath of that standard and picked some that we felt were really important for Kaylee in order for her to make progress. So the first one was that she will use phonetic analysis to read, write, and spell grade level text. And then we went ahead and put where that came from. And the second one, she will develop accuracy, phrasing, and expression while reading grade level text.
This next present level performance is of an example of a 6th grade student, Ashley. Ashley is in the 6th grade. Classroom assessments indicate that Ashley is proficient in the areas of knowledge of print, phonological awareness, word analysis, and fluency. She is not yet proficient in the areas of vocabulary and comprehension. Ashley's difficulties with these skills interfere with her comprehension of text. When given a 6th grade curriculum-based measurement Mays assessment, Ashley currently scores 7, which is at the 11th percentile compared to other 6th grade students. The above information indicates that Ashley will need support and/or direct instruction from special education providers in order to make progress toward the Nebraska state standards. So you can see we told what she's actually able to do, we've compared her to her peers, and we're linking it to the standards. And then this is an example of a goal that we might write for Ashley. In 36 weeks, when given a 5th grade CBM Mays assessment, Ashley will earn a score of 27. Again, we've listed the Nebraska Language Arts Standard behind that, and then we drilled down and found some objectives that we felt would link directly to this goal. And that would be students will build literacy, general academic, and context-specific grade level vocabulary, and students will extract and construct meaning using prior knowledge, applying text information, and monitoring comprehension while reading grade level text. Another way we can do this is by replacing the word students with the child's name, and then it makes it a little bit more personable for the child.
Okay, the last example then is an older student, and this one is math. So for the PLEP statement, Kim is in the 8th grade. Her state and classroom assessment data indicate proficiency with number sense concepts. However, she has not been proficient in the areas of geometric concepts, algebraic concepts, and data analysis probability concepts. And when we show you later on the actual standards from the website, you'll see that those are the 4 areas, the 4 strands that are listed underneath every single grade level's standard, state standards. So she's mastered the number sense concepts, but is still having trouble with the other 3. And that's all information you would get when you're gathering all of that information about the student. When assessed using an 8th grade curriculum-based math concept and application procedure, so again in this case she's being monitored with Ames Web, Kim currently scores 7, which is at the 3rd percentile when compared to other 8th grade students. The above information indicates that Kim will need support and/or direct instruction from special education providers in order to make progress toward the Nebraska state standards. So for her goal then, when given a 5th grade curriculum-based measurement, so you can see that even though she's older, when you decided on her instructional level, it came out to be 5th grade. So that's why her goal is written at the 5th grade level. So when given a 5th grade curriculum-based measurement, Kim currently scores 5, which is at the 14th percentile. In 36 weeks, when given a 6th grade CBM Concepts and Applications Assessment, Kim will earn a score of 19. And then in parentheses, we just put the 3 strands directly from the Nebraska state standards that she is still having difficulty with, that she has not mastered. And then again, we drilled down and picked some objectives that we know are going to be important in order for her to make progress.
Also, a little bit later in our presentation, we'll show you more goals that show benchmarks as well as objectives. The goals we've shared with you so far just list objectives. We will now show you how we can add our benchmarks as well.
Okay, so that concludes this part of the presentation. Next, we're going to show you the website and then show you some more examples.
At the top of the screen, you'll see the website that we shared with you earlier in our keynote address. This is the website for the Nebraska Department of Education, and this is where you'll look to find your standards. You'll want to bookmark this website. It's very easy to maneuver through this website. Right here, you'll see the language arts area and the math area for the various standards. If you want to look up something in the language arts, all you have to do is click on the box, and then you can come down here and choose what grade level you want to look at. So for example, if you were going to do some language arts goals and you had a student reading at first grade instructional level, you just go here and click in the first grade area and then click on search. And down below you will see the various standards.
Okay, so for first grade language arts, the 4 overall standards are: students will learn and apply reading skills and strategies to comprehend text. Students will learn and apply writing skills and strategies to communicate. Students will learn and apply speaking and listening skills and strategies to communicate. And students will identify, locate, and evaluate information. So you'll want to pick which one or which ones most closely align with your student's goal, and that's the one you'll want to include then in the IEP. And then whenever you see the little plus sign, that's where you can drill down, and what that does is it gives you more specific skills that are found underneath of that overall standard. So you might want to pick some of those things then to include as well. Just depends on the student and what their needs are.
Okay. The same goes for if you want to look for math. You just go up to the top and you would click in the math box and unclick language arts, or it'll keep showing you all of this information. Possibly you want to look for a third grade student, so I'm going to just click math in third grade and then hit my search button again. And the same thing will happen. You'll see the various math standards. And again, there's a plus sign, so you can drill down and be more specific so you can meet the individual needs of your students. And it gets very specific, and these are really good to use as your benchmarks in your benchmarks and objectives.
And one thing to point out is that, when you first start using this, you might think, oh my goodness, this is going to be so overwhelming because there's so many standards. But you'll quickly find when you get in here that these 4 main ones, especially for math, are the same at every single grade level. And, they directly line up with the assessments, the state assessments that are given. So it really is simpler than what it looks like, because the number sense concepts, the geometric concepts and measurement, algebraic concepts, and then the data analysis and probability concepts. Those are the 4 main standards for every grade level. But then when you drill down, then you'll see the more specific skills that match up with that grade level's curriculum.
And you can see I forgot to unclick the first grade level, so here's your first grade math, and now it's going to show you third grade math. That's why if you want to work with just one grade level, you need to make sure you mark the box that you want to use.
So really simple to use. What's nice is you can just find the standards and the specific objectives that you want to use, and then you can just cut and paste those right into your IEP, so you don't even have to retype it.
The last part of our presentation is to provide you with some documents and examples of things that you might want to include in your standard-based IEPs. You'll find some present level of performance statements, some goals, and just other various information you might want to include. And we won't read through every goal for you and every present level, but just kind of to show you here at the beginning. This is an example of a 5th grade student, and he or she has areas of need in reading, writing, and math. We've listed different information from our testing and assessments. We've listed information from Ames Web monitoring that we did, data collection. We've listed information from district assessments. And then we took that information and used it in our PLEP. And you'll see in the PLEP we've included that information. We've hooked it to our, at the bottom we've hooked it to our Nebraska state standards. Using the Ames Web information, all of our district information, anything that was important. And then below that you'll find some goals, and there's goals for reading CBM, reading maze. We've showed you where the student was at, where we want him to be at the end of a year, and we've hooked in our language arts statement at the end. And you'll notice here, now we talked earlier about how we'd show you some benchmark ideas for goal writing. And in this area right here, you'll see we have our 9, 27, and 36 week benchmarks. And that's come directly from our Ames Web monitoring. And then we've listed the language art objectives that were applicable to this goal.
And like we mentioned earlier, you can see up here in the goal where you list the language arts standard. Students will learn and apply reading skills and strategies to comprehend text. Don't worry about putting which grade level you got that from, because they're all stated the same. So it's not important that you indicate that there. But then down below on the objectives, that's where you will want to include which level that came from, and it might not necessarily be at their grade level. More than likely it will be at their instructional level.
And you can see here where we took out the students will read a variety of texts, and we put in a child's name, and at the end then we listed the actual standard we used. And that's done throughout the different goals. Here's an example of an RMA's doing the same things, or writing, and some different math goals for using MCAP. This is an example of a first grade student, so they'll look a little bit differently because we use a test of early literacy and a test of early numeracy for Ames Web assessments. But we included all what we might have in the initial or recent evaluations on page 2 of your IEP. State and district assessments, and then page 3 would be your PLEP. And then here's some examples of goals using letter naming, again using the benchmarks from the Ames Web data that was collected, and then objectives from the state standards. Here's an example of letter sound, and so on, phoneme segmentation. And then here's some tests of early numeracy, types of goals. Again, you'll be receiving these documents, from your CNSSP supervisors. If you happen to be a middle school teacher, we also have some samples of middle school PLEPs and goals. This is an example of a middle school student who had a need in the area of reading. Here's the goal. Again, as you can see, we listed the state standard number behind the objective. And this particular student happened to be using 8th grade level standards. And then here's an example of our maze goal. And if you have any further questions, you can contact your CNSSP supervisor.
And keep in mind, these are just samples. We don't want our IEPs to be cookie cutter IEPs. We don't want you to take exactly what was in these and use them for your students. Obviously, you'll want to take a look at your students and what their needs are, and then write your goals accordingly based on the state standards. But hopefully this will give you some examples to get you started.